let's start off with the renewables part. Yeah, the longer-term renewables element in the energy mix. Svante.
I think that's one of our progress. We have been rather successful when we have introduced this electricity certificates, and we have a lot of biomass. So I think the renewables is more or less rather good. I will come back later to the efficiency. But I think we have to take another step. We need a very concrete vision. I mean, we have so good circumstances, natural circumstances in Sweden. It's easy to compare with other countries. We have a lot of energy, biomass and wind and water power, so it's easy for us. I think we could manage to have 100% renewables to 2030, and I think that will be the new clear target for the Swedish government.
Thank you. The challenge is on the table. Annika, from your wind perspective.
Yes, and from the renewable perspective, actually, we can see that renewables has the potential to deliver 100% electricity if we need that in 2030, and if we want. And that includes water, onshore wind, offshore wind, biofuels, solar and efficiency. And we can also, if the nuclear investments won't be made, we can sort of deliver everything in 2030. So I agree to Svante's
challenge.
Yes.
Very good. Maria, from the industry perspective, the renewables part in the mix.
Well, our starting point is, I guess, the same as the IEA and the Swedish government, to have a security of supply, low environmental impact, and cost-competitive energy supply. And so far, I think the renewables have contributed to that in Sweden. But we see challenges in the future for Sweden, which comes with a larger part of renewables integrated into the energy system, which also comes with the threats we see around hydropower at the moment, where we fear actually we will diminish the generation capacity. And we also have the sort of the elephant in the room, which nobody's speaking about. What will happen with our energy system once the nuclear is phased out? And all these together, it creates uncertainties. And looking at the global perspective with actually lowered energy prices in a lot of sectors in the world, the shale gas boom, etc., that gives some considerations. Will the Swedish energy policy be able to deliver in the future, especially when it comes to cost competitiveness and security of supply?
Very good. Birgitta, as one of the producers of electricity, could you tell us a bit your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we have a long-term vision that solar economy will come, and that is indirect and direct fuel from the solar, wind, bio, geo, and wave, and so on. But of course, there's a time scale. When do we come there? It's a need of technical breakthrough. We have to get the cost down of these technologies so we can get a market price. So I think we have perhaps another perspective of the timescale, and of course here we have in Sweden, as we have a lot of part, just as Maria said, about the nuclear. What will happen with that, and how much can we introduce renewables in there? But I also think, and I just went through the summary here from IEA. I think the hydro discussion is sometimes taken for granted in Sweden. We do not see really the challenges we have. We have the increased legislation differences, the implementation of the Water Frame Directive. We have a huge increase of taxes on hydro at the moment. And we also see that the withdrawal of the certificate just at this time. So, I mean, we can see a great challenge. We can sometimes estimate about minus 10% of the production. So, of course, that is something that we have to also consider and see how we can deal with this in a good way.
Very good. It's the same issue that Maria was also referring to. Very good. I would like to pick up on the issue of the customer also a bit. We've talked about, or heard from Maria about empowering the customer. Daniel had a number of examples of the role of the customer in this transition. Jan, your views, your perspectives.
Yes. The consumer empowerment and the consumer benefits are, of course, as you pointed out, key to success here, because they are so many and they are so important. And if you look at the situation now, even though important step has been taken by the government, and some are a few years ahead, many consumers that we meet think that electricity is very boring, actually, and also very difficult, and they feel confused and worried and sometimes even angry about their situation. So it's really an important task and a challenge to empower consumers so that they understand and so that they will be able to really change the behavior, because the lack of knowledge and the lack of interest is really a problem that has not been identified enough. And I think it should be, it's very easy when you have discussions like this that you said, everything is in place, the consumer will be active now. It's important that you don't daydream, that you have realistic visions and really see what's happening in the single household, in the apartment. Do they know what are the main sources that consumes energy? What can I do about it? In what way can my changes of my pattern have a good impact both on my wallet and on the environment? And you have a long way to go there, really. And it's a lot of concrete steps that you have to take. Some have been taken: comparability, easy switch, easy builds, impartial advisory service, and so on.
Very good, thank you. The consumer is a key element in establishing the goals that we see for ourselves long term, and you're saying that there's a potential to
there's
improve.
Potential, but it's really a challenge because it's so consumption patterns differ so much, and the knowledge and needs and interest is also very different from consumer to consumer.
Very good. We can hear maybe a bit more about from our colleagues here how they pick up that challenge. We've talked about policy. We can also talk a bit about research and development, technological development. Would like to hear from first Mats and then also Lennart. The role of technology development in this picture that we see here, and in particular that longer-term picture.
Well, we have R&D in our DNA, so to speak. We've done this in 1883, and we will continue to do so, because that's also part of our competitive edge. We can see many technologies coming up now. DC breaker is something brand new, which will revolutionize the way we are handling transmission systems in the future. Also, electrical motors. We talked about consumers. There's also industrial consumers in this area. And we should know that 45% of all electricity used comes from electrical motors. And if we, with technology, can reduce that by maybe 30% or something like that, it is a substantial amount of energy which we save. This is also a benefit for the consumer, of course, because the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one not used or the one not consumed.
Very good.
Okay, there are large. Does it work? Yes. Okay, there are large possibilities and challenges, of course, in the technology development. But when you see the implementation, for example, in Sweden, it's important that we also see that there must be a market for these kind of technologies. For example, we can take one example, which is smart grids, which is very interesting, where you can the consumers can respond on changing prices. But if we don't have changing prices, we will not have so much respond, and the technology will not be developed. So it's a lot of these kind of possibilities are interesting for the future when we have large amounts of renewables. But it's just, to be honest, we don't have large amounts of variable renewables currently in Sweden. And that means that a lot of these technology development that we have in Sweden cannot be so interesting just in Sweden if we don't have these large amounts of renewables. And then just a connection to that which I would like to say, and that is that I agree here with what Maria and Birgitta said earlier, that there is a large challenge with, let's say, the nuclear development in Sweden. It's in this IEA report, they discuss nuclear replacement in 2030, which is nearly 18 years or 17 years from now, I really wonder, to be honest, will we really have all these kind of nuclear in, let's say, 5 or 7 years? And I think it's extremely important. I think it's very good that you brought this issue up, because if we have a realistic vision of what will happen within 5 or 7 years, then perhaps we will also have other kind of investments in all these kind of interesting issues that can be interesting in a system with very much larger amount of variable renewables.
Thank you, Lennart. Urban, your perspective also, we've seen we have a huge challenge when it's concerned the transportation sector. R&D, technology development. Your company is very active here.
Yeah. The common sense says that the transport sector is the most difficult to make a transition to more renewable energy, and I'm not really sure that is completely true. With the right policies, I would say that renewable energy in the transportation sector has a bright future. What we must see now in terms of technology development is that I would like to see some very good demonstration arenas built up, so we can test, for example, electrification on the road, so we can go with heavy-duty vehicles on electricity, and then I don't mean with batteries, but I mean with constant charging, for example, from the road via induction or something like that. That is something that is very important to start to try now. That technology is not commercial, but today, but with such a test arena, I think it's much easier to make it come true later on. I would also like to see a test arena, for example, for a real bus rapid transit system, where we have very nice built and good buses that function more or less like a tram, but on the road with the normal flexibility of buses, and perhaps also try to electrify a bus line in that setup. I can say a lot more about how we shall make this with the renewables to come true, but I can come back to that later.
I hope you have a chance for that. Yeah. Somebody else Jan, you wanted to add to this discussion also?
Yeah, about the smart technology, yes. We are definitely in favor of smart technology, but it's very important that you see it from a consumer perspective. Of course, that's self-evident. The accessibility, the affordability, and also the integrity aspect that I would like to introduce as well, because a lot of personal data will be transferred now to the companies. And what will happen to it? Is it sold to other stakeholders, or what's happened with? And this is an issue of big concern to the consumer movement in Europe.
Very good. I think we need to talk a bit about energy efficiency also.
Yes.
There's a very, very interesting challenge we have there, Svante. There's a lot of potential. We've seen earlier reports also, the annual report from the IEA, for example, potentials of up to 80% in buildings and industry. First you, Svante, then Maria, your perspectives.
I mean, the whole world knows that the main strategy to handle this climate change is to use energy more efficient. And it's the cheapest way also. So it's a very good potential to solve this in a very cheap way. But it's also the most bad thing in the Swedish and the other countries also. I think that the policies for incentives for the use energy more efficient is very, very bad. And I wonder why. Because it's also a special Swedish culture. I think many of the colleagues in the finance department, they don't believe that we need some instrument at all for the use energy more efficient. I think that's the main question. Do we need instruments? Do we need policies in this field? We have incorrect prices, and we know also that the ETS markets now more or less have collapsed, and we have the wrong prices on the nuclear power plants. So I think the price is wrong, but we also have a real market failure in this field. And I don't think the colleagues from HUT and others have support from the finance department that we have really need strong instruments. And I think the target should be an absolutely target, not only the target for intensive use the energy more intensive. We have to absolutely target, and where I think we could reduce the amount of electricity and energy at all by 50% to 2030. And I think this is a main challenge, but it's very good for the companies and for the households, and it's cheap for the whole Swedish economy.
Maria, what else is there to add?
To some parts I agree with Svante, but to some parts not. I have to admit, energy efficiency is very important, and I agree with Svante that I think that there has been a perception that there is no stimuli needed for energy efficiency. But I think there are hinders in overcoming to actually be more efficient, which we're not addressing just by the price. So Svante is saying the price is wrong, and I've also heard here from Daniel that we are spoiled with cheap energy in Sweden. I don't think that the answer is only to raise the price in order to achieve energy efficiency. It's also to find other ways of stimulating the energy efficiency, and it's different for different sectors. In the industry sector, we have this fabulous program for energy efficiency, which we hope will continue and be broadened as a part of the implementation of the Energy Efficiency Directive. But for example, for the building sector, there is a lack of a clear path on how the buildings should become more energy efficient. So that is also something that Sweden needs to work on. So I would say energy efficiency is very important, and I think it needs more attention in the Swedish energy policy. I agree with that.
Very good. Urban, you also wanted to add to this discussion.
Yes. I would say that also for transportation, improved efficiency is a key factor. And with that, I mean, we need better driver skills and better support for drivers. We need better logistic and transportation planning. But for Scania, it's also very important to have a transition from passenger cars to more public transport. That would make the energy we need for transport we can use it in a much better way then, and also I would say that renewable electricity and renewable biofuels, what we have will be enough for what's left over after this improved efficiency.
Good point. Not just buildings and industry, transportation exactly. Just as well. Birgitta, you wanted.
Yeah, we could in a way go back also to the consumer. I mean, here we have, it's like John talked about the consumer, and that there are quite a lot of consumers that are not really interested in knowing so much about the energy and so on. They think they have quite a fairly low, modest cost for it. But you have to get the customer or consumer aware. And here, of course, with the ICT and new technology, with displays and what we call home control, that you can look really how the resources are used. So the awareness is very important, I think, here as the first step. But then looking into buildings, for instance, as we are also working with district heating, here, I mean, it's very important that a lot can be done in the buildings of efficiency. But here we have to look at the standards, and we do have a discussion on how the standards are outlined here in Sweden, as we do not really see that they have the right system approach, where we really have to look at the resource efficiency. And here I think there's quite a lot to do to highlight this type of discussion as well.
Very good. Mats, I also saw that you were interested in adding to this. I know that from your company that your energy services division guarantees already a 5% energy efficiency increase without even looking at the installations.
Yes, I agree with what the previous speaker has talked about here, but I think it's interesting to say that IEA earlier claimed that to reach the energy efficiency targets, we need, or to reach the 450 ppm target, we need to use energy efficiency as the main tool for that. And there is so much more than the consumer side of this. We are energy efficient in terms of how we are producing energy, in how we are transmitting it, and so on and so forth. And again, if we see the future highways of electricity around the world, you can save enormous amount of money and an enormous amount of energy. And again, it could lessen our burden of replacing that energy source with that energy source, and so on and so forth in the future. So energy efficiency is, as we say it, one of the major challenges, but also the major opportunities.
Very good. Lennart.
what I would like to add is that you have to have a system perspective on this. Because there is a risk, of course, that you make your house more energy efficient and then you move to electric heating and then you get the electricity on the margin from a power plant with 50% efficiency. And then you have perhaps made your house more efficient, but not from the system perspective. So I think it's correct to have both the right prices and also the right information, because sometimes you only look on the final consumer and you don't care about all the transports with all the fuel and everything to the final consumer. So it's the whole system that you have to study here.
Good point. Maria and then Svante.
But yeah, I was going to add that I think it's important to keep the customer perspective because we tend to look at this from a very top-down perspective. And as said earlier, I think to actually have the customer with you is very, very important. I experience the same issues as you say when I talked to industrial consumers. I mean, there are big industries which are very interested in energy and which it's very important for, but there are also a lot of small businesses which actually don't find energy to be a key issue. So actually to keep the customer perspective and also to get the customer to actually being interested in this, I think it will be a key in order to actually achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Good, Svante.
I think EU can play a really important role in this perspective, because I think the price is incorrect and the price is, we need to change that, of course, but it's not, I agree with Maria, it's not the only thing. I think we need regulations on the products, very strong regulations, and we have seen that very successful from the Eco Design Directive. We have changed our lamps. It would be very difficult to change that by prices. We have seen a successful step forward when you see regulations on the cars. We have a bad regulation in Sweden about new houses and so on. I mean, it's a very, very heavy way to change the society only by prices. We need regulations on the products, and that's an easy way to change it very fast.
Very good. Last on this, Annika, and then we
yes,
move on.
I also want to see more of the consumer being able to generate their own electricity. And as you highlighted in the report, we have now we are looking at the net debitating in Sweden at the moment, and that is very, very important. That's it.
Yes, very good. We'll have that soon, right, Daniel? Very good. Just a few words before I open up for a wider discussion. It's easy to look at this from just a Swedish perspective. Let's also broaden our views a bit. The Swedish perspective within the EU, for example. What are the key elements there that we should look at? Who wants to start? Svante.
We have to be an export for electricity, as we have to be a big export country for electricity, for renewables electricity. And I think also a very difficult and very interesting issue in Sweden is that some parts of our institutions, like Konjunkturinstitutet, say that we can't, if we reach our efficient targets, we make it more costly climate policy. It's a bad thing if we reach efficiency target. I think also we have a debate that some of us say that we are more or less fossil-free in the heat and electricity sector, so we can use electricity very, very inefficient. It's only the transport sector who is directly connected to the fossil issue. I mean, we have to see the marginal effects and the export potential in everything. And I think that perspective is not common in Sweden.
Very good. Who else wants to add to this? Annika first.
I would like to say that if we continue our powerful investments in renewables, this would be a security sort of case, as we can, if we have a surplus of electricity, if we will build more nuclear power, then we will have a very fine situation to export, as Svante said, and help Europe to decarbonize. But if we will not be able, or if there will not be any investments in nuclear, we will have secure investments made in renewables in Sweden so that we can make it anyway. So it's important to continue the powerful investments in renewables for secure.
Very good point, Maria. Wants to add to this? We've talked also earlier about the security aspects and the distribution capacity.
Yeah, definitely. What Sweden could add to the European Union is actually to think more of a cost competitiveness, to actually achieve internationally cost competitive pricing on energy will be a key issue for Europe in the future. When I talk to people in business and looking out over the globe and seeing the energy prices actually going down in other parts of the world, that is very worrying. Europe is not an attractive place to invest for producing businesses anymore. They are looking to the US, they are looking to the Middle East, they are looking to Asia, which is closer to the markets. So I think we actually also need to see the connection between energy policy and a competitive Europe, and that to have a competitive industry as customers to the energy sector as well is very important. Of course, we can export our electricity and to help achieving Europe, for them to achieve the carbon targets. But also we need to look at the effects for Sweden. Sweden has an industry structure based on a lot of energy-intensive companies, and the effects of this and to safeguard our competitive edge is very important.
Lennart, as a next.
Okay, concerning the connection to our neighbors in the world, just one thing, assume that I save energy in my save electricity in Sweden. That will not result in less nuclear production, not less combined heat and power production, not less hydropower production. It will in reality mean less production in some of our neighboring countries. And I think that is extremely important when we are discussing, let's say, energy efficiency in exactly the same way as has been discussed earlier, that the environmental impact has to do with what is happening in our neighboring countries, not so much in Sweden concerning the electricity.
Excellent. Birgitta.
Yes, I just want to highlight that building more and more volatile energy is a need for more infrastructure. And of course, here it's important to have a stronger connection and also to secure this system. But what we can see at the moment in EU is that we have a great challenge how the electricity market develops in the pricing and the system with the different subsidies system in the different countries. And here I think that, just as highlighted today, that our green certificate system is one of the best. If we should have a support scheme for renewable, we should work for that. So that I think could be a good way also for IEA to promote that more also to EU Commission.
Good idea. Good play. Urban and then Annika.
From my perspective, I must say that I'm a little worried that the EU seem to bother less and less for energy security, especially when it comes to the use of renewable energy and in the transportation sector. They've put up a lot of obstacles that will make it difficult to use biofuels. And I must say that it's an important part of Swedish policy in the European Union to influence them to have a better and more reasonable renewable energy policy.
Very good. Annika?
I want to say that it's very important that we step up our efforts on grids, because we need more grids, both to enable the more and more renewable electricity and to Europe. That's very important. I also wanted to say that the EAI launched a report the other week, the Nordic Technology Perspective. That is a very interesting report and very challenging. And in that report, you say that the Nordic countries together could export 150 terawatt to the European Union within 2050. And that's
from wind power. Or
renewables.
Renewables.
Yes.
Very good. Jan, on this issue the last, and then we'll open up the discussion.
Yeah, to achieve sustainable consumption and production of energy, it's very important with the European perspective, and I agree with Svante that you have to have a balance between price and regulation. And most of the regulation, since it's a more and more common market, it must be on an EU level. And we are working very close to the other consumer organizations in Europe. And they often turn to us and ask, how is it working in Sweden? Because Sweden is recognized that as a country where we've come quite far. So we must be very consumer-oriented and make more consumer surveys and research. There's a big lack of common research from a consumer perspective to achieve a sustainable consumption and production. And also very important is to get a real competition in this field. You must have a very strong enforcement bodies, both when it comes to tools and when it comes to resources.
Very good, with a breadth of ideas and reactions. Excellent. Maria, you have to understand, we as Swedes, it's very difficult to be satisfied. I'd like...
You are like Dutchmen.
I'd like to invite both of you up, if we could sort of make even a bit more room for Daniel and Maria to join us up here. And then I will open up for questions. There are no microphones, so please speak up, introduce yourself, and I will repeat your question so that we'll make sure that we catch it right. Yeah? Any interested from the audience? I saw a hand up over there. Could you stand up and speak up, please? Magnus.
Magnus Enfeldt from WWF. A question regarding one of the key recommendations on energy technology, and which was made in the report. Last week I attended another event where General Electric Nordic executive gave a message to the enterprise minister Arlö that public policy is more important than public investments in technology. So I would like to hear maybe from Maria if you can give a perspective on policy in terms of, as you have said in previous reports, on the balance between technology push and market pull. How Sweden is doing on that, and maybe Daniel, please also as well discussing your thoughts about how to develop more instruments for pulling technology out into the global market, as compared to pushing only sort of, because we are very good at bringing technologies from research to products, but we're not as good at bringing them out into companies and out into the global market. Thank you very much, Magnus.
Directly to Maria and Daniel. Push or pull? Maria, would you like to start off?
Both. Both, but the question is how to find the right balance. In our view, for instance, here in Sweden, you could really be, what could really be very effective is an enhanced linkage between the RD&D strategy and clean tech strategy, for instance, because that would help leverage the public funds already invested. That's one remark. I think it's of the utmost importance that public policy is there, that public policy engages all stakeholders, and do not forget the public, because it's important to have not only the awareness but the support of the public. For instance, when you want to build new wind farms, etc., you need the public. Without the public, you can't get anywhere. And about public investments, well, it's a taxpayer's investment. So I think it's of the utmost important that your schemes are in such a way that you trigger private investments, because in that way you can also organize a competitive market. A public investment and public policy is just one side of the whole story. And if you forget the private investments, the companies, etc., there won't be a market. And that's what companies want to have, competition. And that's exactly what's important for consumers as well, because then they will see that they have different prices and they have more opportunities to make their choice.
Daniel.
Yes, thank you for that intelligent question. I would say that, as Executive Director mentioned, we need both. We are actually giving Eric and his authority a more stable ground now, with resources for R&D at a not previously seen level, much higher level than before. That is important to build infrastructure. the research and development that is carried out from the authority, energy agency, is to a high degree together with the industry, which is very important. So we are aiming at specific challenges to come up with good solutions. So it's closer to market. And that makes our energy research and development very important. But then I think the market have a lesson here to make. As a market liberal, I firmly believe that the companies should take these opportunities. It's a fact that in Sweden we have a lot of capitalists not engaging in clean tech and energy, while the world market is just to be seized. So it's of course a mission for the government and politicians to set a good business climate in general, where R&D is very important in this specific area. We have to lower taxes. We have to make simplifications for companies. We have to have a stable environment economically. We have that, actually, today, because we have the strongest economy in Europe at the moment. But companies, innovators, business, they have to do their lesson as well.
Very good, thank you. Please feel free to add also, Mats.
Yeah,
quick reaction on this.
Representing a company with revenues of $5.5 billion, and we're exporting 85% of that. I don't really sort of recognize the whole picture here. But anyway, I think it is important to understand that the projects we're talking about in Europe today is immense investments. I mean, we're talking of billions of euros in each project. And obviously, private investments is not enough in this area. We need to have public funding as well, or public guarantees as well in that area, and that's important to know. Another thing is that we're talking inherently about new technologies in many aspects. And new technology is fine when we do it in laboratories and stuff like that, but we also need demonstrators. We need to demonstrate the technology, that it actually works in real life. And there is where public funding is increasingly important in doing this. And we see our competitors doing this quite easily out in Asia, for instance. We have a very good foundation for that in Sweden, but also in other countries. So this is really a key issue for the whole development of the energy system.
Thanks, Mats.
I would like to add something.
Yes,
if you don't mind. I think I would like to make two remarks. One is about the stability of investment climate. And this is not only on a national level, we need it on the EU level. And this is something that has to be improved. My second remark is on this demo project. What we did in our energy technology perspectives in 2012, and Bo Dix-Volusi over there, he was one of the authors in that. What we mentioned that is, if you really want to do something about something important to do something about electric vehicles and about power, you have to choose a systems approach. It's impossible just to look only at electric vehicles or at transport. You have to take a systems approach. And we gave some advices on that. We made some recommendations on that. It's the only way to bring things together, and there it's also the only way to show that it is worthwhile, that it's not only worthwhile for now, for the climate, for energy security, but it's also worthwhile for competitiveness and for business. And yes, you need demonstration projects to do that. I agree, because it's not possible to do that only as a company. But then again, it's a push and pull strategy that you need. So again, my real message is do it together. And don't do it like this, but do it together.
Very good, thank you. I have a question here from Lena.
Yeah, my name is, My name is Lena Palm, and I represent the Swedish energy-intensive industries within SKGS. I have a question, why? I hear a lot of representatives in the panel today speaking about the need for a transition of the Swedish electricity production system. And I wonder why. As I see it, we produce on all the main pillars of both the Swedish and European energy policy, competitiveness, environmental consideration, and security of supply. And what I see, if we make a big transition towards a fully renewable system, we might lose some of those pillars, what will happen to the competitiveness and what will happen to the stability and security of supply? And as I read the IEA, I haven't had time to read it fully, but I don't see that you have any recommendations for Sweden to not invest in new nuclear. Right? So you don't support the transition either, or?
Can I give you a very short answer? It's
yes,
up to Sweden. It's up to Sweden. It's not up to an international agency to tell a country you should be in or out nuclear. But your first nuclear power plant will be off in 2022. And the rest will be off in 2030. So you need to make a decision now. Because otherwise you don't know what to do in 2022. Because it takes time to build nuclear power plants. And it takes time to do something about your waste. I was in Forsmark. And I know that you're doing great things there. But there again, it is you need to have a consistent policy. And that's what we ask the Swedish government. It's not only to make a decision, but see to it that you implement it. What are you going to do? But it's not up to an agency to deliver the answer. That's to my neighbor.
I knew this was going to happen.
And I actually need to comment on that because, as I said, we have a stable framework. And actually, this is up to the market to decide within that framework. So it's very easy, actually, to point at politicians to solve every problem. Sometimes the market needs to step up and show some power. This is actually an area where our agreement from the government is very clear in that respect. And I'm awaiting response from the industry, of course. So far, we have seen nothing.
Very good. Very brief reaction from Svante and then from Birgitta, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Maria mentioned before the elephant in the room, and here we are. And I think I'm very optimistic now because I think that we're going to solve this Swedish problem. We have an open market, and we can see that nobody wants to invest in nuclear power plants. So perhaps we can change from 2 tracks to 1 track in Sweden, and that will be very clear, good signals for all investments. And I think we know now that the wind power is much cheaper than the nuclear power plants. So why discuss this issue? It's not commercial longer. So that's why I'm talking about 100% renewables. And I think we are going to change our pattern now to 1 track, and the nuclear power plants is open. We have done a good work in that way. We have proved now that it's not beneficial.
Good. I mean, I promise you, this won't be the last discussion that we have on nuclear power. It could be, but it won't. Birgitta.
I think we start now.
Maybe I could give a comment as being one of owner of nuclear.
No.
We have co-owned nuclear in Sweden, but we own nuclear in Finland. We are building in Finland. But at the moment in Sweden, yes, there is a possibility. Vattenfall has applied for getting the rules from SSM, but we do not have the regulation at the moment. We have no possibility to count what will it cost due to this regulation. We do have a political risk, and we do have a taxation on nuclear in Sweden, which makes it more profitable to build nuclear otherwhere. So, of course, and then also we have the financial situation that makes it difficult. So, I mean, it's... I would say it's not that easy to say that we will build nuclear, but we have interest, we are looking into it, but there are obstacles. But as I said in the beginning, we do believe nuclear will have some sort of role, maybe not that big as at the moment, but also we see that there are development in nuclear, small nuclear, things happening there.
Very good, thank you. Then I would like to continue with a question here from the gentleman. Could you stand up and speak up? Yes.
I'll try to speak up. I'm actually continuing on the previous. My name is Tobias Petrini, and I'm representing myself. That's important. I'm continuing on the last questions. You had a series of recommendations for Sweden and Swedish energy policy. I wonder why, or I have a specific question. There is an enormous global challenge in combating climate change. It's in essence an economic challenge. It's very, very important to do this cost effectively. However, Sweden is very advanced in this transition, because we sort of never had to transite. Is it really sensible for us to have a target of zero emission in 2050, when the cost of that would probably, or that investment in that would probably be a lot more effective somewhere else in the world? What would your opinion on that be?
Okay. Is it sensible to go to zero?
It's very sensible.
Yes.
Let me give you another example, and then it's also part of my answer. If you look at Europe and you see where solar energy is produced most cost efficiently and effectively, it's not in Sweden. It's somewhere else. At the same time, what we have seen in Europe, in Spain, there was a huge production of solar energy. It was wonderful. And they couldn't export it because export opportunities to France were limited. So what did they do? They couldn't use it. And it was financed, it was subsidized. What we can see in Germany, where you have the windmills, the offshore windmills in the north producing a lot of wind energy, has to be used in the south, where the industrial center of gravity is. But to get it there, their own interconnection is not enough from north to south within Germany. So they use the Dutch grid and the Polish grid and other grids. This makes clear that no country is an island, and no country can think that you can solve this problem on yourself and on your own. You need to have a European policy, and we need to be aware of the fact that competitiveness and the market has to be there to bring prices down. And that's not what is the case at this moment. On the other hand, we can see in the Nordic part of Europe, in Scandinavia, that we have Nordic grid, that we have Nord Pool, and that we have cables. For instance, from Norway to the Netherlands, to Denmark, to Germany, and even in future to the United Kingdom. Two-way. And that means export and import. So you use a larger market. So in our view, it's absolutely necessary that you have a large market to be competitive and to be able to meet your objectives. You can't do it just by yourself. And that's also the reason why we favor a retail market in the Nordic region. Is it in this Swedish report? No, you're right. Although not quite, because the remark on the bigger market is there. But of course, when you look into the European side, that's not in here, but you can find it in World Energy Outlook, for instance. And you can also find in World Energy Outlook what we expect to happen in electricity prices. And there again, it's Europe that has to make its choices, because otherwise it will be squeezed. Squeezed because in the United States, electricity prices will come down, and that means that competitiveness of the states will be bigger than it is now. So there again, I would like to emphasize no island approach. No country is an island, and no country is immune for what's happening anywhere else in the world. Is this a plea for a European approach? Yes, it is. Also when we are looking into subsidy schemes, for instance, because now sometimes industry goes there where they get the most money.
Very good, thank you. Very briefly, Maria, on this.
Just a comment on whether Sweden should have a net zero emission or actual zero emissions. If you look at the Swedish emissions, I mean, they come mainly from the transport sector and from the industry sector, actually, and the agriculture sector. So, I mean, the energy system and the transition of the energy system is not contributing to this. So I think, actually, we need to look at where do we have the most effect on climate, actually. What should we do from a Swedish perspective in order to actually lower our emissions? That is not actually to invest in wind power or solar cells. That are other things. Energy efficiency, for example, in Sweden is not equal to climate policy, because we have a heating and we have electricity which does not emit that much carbon.
Very good, thank you. I would like to get in two more questions, and I have one gentleman over there, and then Magnus, and then we'll see where the time goes. please.
My name is Resvik. I'm working part-time here and part-time for the Swedish Heat Pump Association. I have been looking a little about research money, how much is reinvested in research. And in the IT sector and the medicine sector of the society, about 13 to 15% of the turnaround of that sector is reinvested in research and development. That's why we have such notebooks and phones, etc., etc. If we look at Sweden as a whole, about 3 to 4% of the gross national product is reinvested in research and development. If we look in Sweden at the energy sector, about 1% of the turnaround of the energy sector is reinvested into research and development. And if you look to the states part of that, it's about 0.3% of the turnaround in the energy sector that is reinvested into research and development.
And your question is
that really optimal?
Is that really optimal? Can we get a brief answer to that? Daniel?
It sounds too low. Maybe Eric wants to give me also some answer to this. I mean, he actually gave us a report where he asked for about the amount that we gave them. He was aiming too low, maybe, but I think there is room to step up, of course. But I mean, the question is also stated to the companies, I guess.
And I think it's important also to realize a lot of the work that being put into energy is co-financing. It's the cooperative effort together with the industry and the public sector. So it's more than just that part that you're putting up on the table.
That was taken into account.
Okay. Then I go on to Magnus.
Magnus Olofsson from Elfors. Maria, you mentioned that no country is an island, and I agree. And we heard about Annika, you mentioned interconnection. And I'm going to address a question on networks. Isn't it so that we have to go from national grids to inter-European grids? Isn't it so that we need a backbone of power lines? I mean, now not even Germany and Norway are interconnected as a country, because we need to connect Europe. And then the question is about R&D. I mean, I have calculated the same as you did up there. It's about 0.2% of the revenues of the grid companies in Sweden that goes to R&D, for example. So don't we need to step up R&D in power transmission, and especially in high power transmission, like making cables throughout Europe? That's my question.
Brief reaction, Daniel.
I think also the EU system and has to live also within the framework of the third inner market package, so that actually the payment for the grids are made where they make the most benefits as well. So, and that is not an easy task. We have seen that. So I'm sure Maria could add to that. But as a former energy minister of the Netherlands, that is actually a tough challenge on the European level to clear out who is going to pay. Yes. And then we need also a market-based system in the whole of Europe, not only in Scandinavia. So, because otherwise there will not be the efficient market solutions to this. So this is a very big challenge for Europe.
The answer to your question is yes, and yes, we do need a market-based system in Europe, and we don't have it in all the countries. I remember the discussion about unbundling a couple of years ago when I was Minister. Maud Olofsson was Minister for Sweden. And I also remember the resistance of some countries, some big countries in Europe, essential countries, because you have to find this market-based system, that's true. And interconnection, the backbone is really, the backbone in electricity is interconnection, is a grid. And if you don't have it, if you don't have the high voltage grid, it's very, very difficult to get an integrated market and to make use, well, to really have the benefits of competition. I agree.
Very briefly, Mats. Anne?
Yeah, just to interact on that. We are investing about $1.4 billion annually in R&D, and that is R&D in itself. So that is, of course, important. We're also investing right now almost 3 billion Swedish crowns in new production facilities for making cables for interconnections between countries and grid enforcements and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of investments going on. Could always be more. I can agree with that. But that's what we do today.
Very good. We're getting close to the end of this session. I'm sorry. I would like to get the gentleman in the back as the last question.
I'm Abhishek from the Division of Energy Systems Analysis at KPA. I have a question about how much do you think national borders represent the energy system boundaries? Because as Maria just explained, the importance of the energy market and how that's key to any country's national strategy. Because we're building an open source Sweden energy model, and we're finding more and more that to make a sensible analysis of maybe a nuclear phase-out strategy, it's impossible to do this without taking the energy system boundary as greater than Sweden's national borders. So, and this is going to become less and less representative of the energy system boundaries in the future. So, how do we look at where do we set the boundaries, and how much do the national boundaries represent the energy system boundaries?
That seems like a very holistic close to this question. Very briefly, Daniel, first.
I think we're not looking at energy policy with a systems approach, which I think most of us are in favor of. This is a very important part. You cannot exclude transmission capacity and building of capacity to transmit from a general energy analysis. On the margin today, the capacity that we have is very important and has proved sufficient. But it doesn't mean that it's sufficient in the future. And our authority, Svenska Kraftnät, is having the responsibility to actually look into this thoroughly and make new assessments on what kind of investments do we need. We have quite a bunch of projects going on. We have connection with Lithuania through the Nord-Balt connection. We have the north-south-west linkage between Sweden and Norway coming up to strengthen that. And that's just the beginning. We need to work further on that. And at the same time, it needs to be cost efficient, and as a lot of people have said. And yeah, and it's basically also about the sharing the costs. Who is going to pay will be essential to who will bear the investment cost and who will take the benefit. And it has a lot to do also with the EU legislation, where there is actually some in-depth analysis from the EU Commission right now on member states, if they are fulfilling actually the inner market rules for the moment. And that could mean actually that they are punishing states. They are looking into whether the market regimes for connections is actually coherent with the EU legislation. So, big topic.
Thank you very much. I would like to, and I'm sorry to have to sort of cut this discussion short. There's many more things that we could discuss. I feel encouraged by the tone of the discussion and the challenges that we have ahead of you. Thank you very much, panel. I would like to offer you to sit down again and give you an applause.